And last week, the focus was on the US's special relationship with Britain. Now it's Japan's turn. Mr. Abe goes to Washington. Now, the best of Quest. Let's talk now to John Roos, a former US ambassador to Japan and a member of the board of directors at Sony, who joins me now. Ambassador, how surprised are you at, we'll deal with Japan first, that during a campaign and a transition, the president tweets about Japan being manipulators, eating America's lunch, nobody ever wins, or the US doesn't win, and now he's making nice?
Well, I'm pleasantly surprised that the president, at least today, seems to have reversed some of the prior comments he made. You know, I was just in Japan a couple of days ago, and there was a lot of nervousness and anxiety about this meeting based upon some of the past comments. But I think President Trump hit the right notes on both the security and economic fronts. I spent more time being specific on the security side of the equation and reinforcing U.S. commitments to the U.S.-Japan alliance, which was very important, punted a little more on the economic side.
Right, and on that point, I mean, if you go back to some of the tweets during the campaign and then the transition, there was this vision of Japan had better start paying up. And anyway, maybe nuclear weapons would be a good idea. I'm paraphrasing there for the Japanese. None of that in today's announcement or in this one, was there? It was all about one all for one and one for all.
No, in fact, just the opposite of the prior statements he had made. He reaffirmed the alliance. In fact, he made a specific reference in the joint statement to the nuclear umbrella that we provide Japan. He reaffirmed the commitment of every past president with regard to the defense of the disputed Senkaku Islands, where there's a dispute between China and Japan. And with regard to the U.S. forces in Japan, he specifically thanked Prime Minister Abe for our presence there and made no reference to Japan increasing its financial contribution, right, which is already 70% of the expenses there, and something that Secretary of Defense Tillis specifically highlighted as a model for the rest of the world.
Now, let us take what you've just said about Japan and move it on to China. I mean, for this interview, I was looking back at some of the comments. You know, in an interview just a few months ago, a few weeks ago, the president said, "Why should I be bound by the one China policy?" The president also said, you know, the Chinese don't consult me before they manipulate the currency. So why do you think he acceded to Xi's request in this way?
Well, I don't know the specifics, but what I had understood was that China was refusing to move forward with any bilateral discussions unless President Trump backed off of that one China policy. You know, if you look at what's important to China, number 1 through 10 is that Taiwanese issue, the one China policy that has been an accepted policy in the region and with the United States for decades now. So it really shook the region that President Trump originally made those statements that he did with regard to the one China policy. So again, pleasantly surprised to see him today back off of that.
All right, but you say it shook the region. Can the region have any more confidence in the reassurances of today, either for China or Japan, than they did, for example, with the concern that they had beforehand? I mean, what's to say next week that there isn't some slight offence or just a change, and Donald Trump goes the other way once again?
There's nothing to say that President Trump will change. That's what many of us have a concern about. I think today was a good day in that regard. What is said tomorrow on the golf course remains to be seen, and what is said in the region in the future remains to be seen. But this was at least a half a step forward, much better than reinforcing some of the prior statements he made. And again, you know, I was just in Japan, and they were concerned with President Trump backing off of the one China policy, because anything like that that destabilizes the region not only is negative from a security point of view, but from an economic point of view. And so, you know, today doesn't get us over the hill with regard to these issues. It's just a modest step forward.